everybody. Welcome back. This is Bankruptcy University with Marshall Slayton, and I'm here with my guest, Simon Stapleton. Simon is an elder law lawyer who has over 30 years of experience representing the elderly and has been practicing in the Charlottesville area since 2000. Simon, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Marshall. Thanks for having me here. Glad to be here.
Great. So you've been practicing elder law and helping out the elderly. How did you get into that sort of line of work? When did you start, and how did you sort of discover that this was what you like to do?
Well, that's an interesting question. What happened was I got a call from Norman one day. I was sitting in my office. Norman called me, and he and his wife, Florence, they had really become adopted grandparents to my kids. Neither my wife nor my parents were nearby, so they had been playing that role. So right. Norman called and he said, "Florence has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Can you help me?" And what I realized was that even though I was already practicing as an estate planning attorney at the time, right, I really didn't have the tools to help him with the dementia, the progression of the disease. So he became my first elder law case. Mm-hmm. Florence did progress, unfortunately, pretty quickly with the disease. She ended up in a nursing home, but I was able to walk Norman through the whole process. We were able to sell his home, get some cash for him there for him to live on, because right, of course the nursing home is so expensive. And we then walked him and Florence through the Medicaid process. He was fortunate, he had a couple of years of long-term care insurance, but when that ran out, we had to apply for Medicaid, and we were able to get him qualified.
Okay, so that was sort of the beginning of the process, and you realized that, gosh, there's really a need here, and I can really help people out who are struggling in this situation when they're trying to deal with their medical situation and trying to figure out, well, how am I going to fund this, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's the huge issue, because nowadays in Virginia, we're talking $80,000, $90,000 a year for a nursing home.
Wow. So Let's talk about this. So what we're really talking about is these Medicaid protection trusts, right? Which is what you were able to set up for Norman and his wife to help him so that when his long-term care for his wife ended, he'd be able to provide the services that she needed without sending him into the poorhouse or bankrupt or whatever. So Let's walk through that process. Tell me a little bit about the average person, what they come into you, and what you've got to do to help them out. Sure.
So, the average person is probably in their 60s or 70s. It really depends. I mean, people come in with very little money. Mm-hmm. And what that means in Medicaid terms, if it's a married couple, generally speaking, if it's less than 100,000, they wouldn't necessarily need a trust, although that does depend on the circumstances. But a lot of people have a home. They may have life savings of $200,000 or $300,000, and obviously very concerned about that money being just wiped out. Because
let's stop right there. I got a question. So regarding this amount of money that people have, let's talk about what those limits are. What's too much? What does the Medicaid look at? What kind of property? So that people know, geez, I need this help, or hey, I don't need this help. I'm good the way I am.
Yeah. Well, that's a great question, because people don't realize one very common thing that happens is the wife comes in, let's say it's the wife, and she'll say, well, we're okay. Everything's in my name, right? And the answer to that is no, that's not right. So if it's a married couple, doesn't matter whether it's in her name, his name, or joint names. If he's going into the nursing home, they're going to look at her assets, the wife assets as well.
That's even if it's held as tenants by the entirety, which
it
right
doesn't matter. Yeah,
doesn't matter. Right.
You can have IRAs in her name. It doesn't matter. It's all fair game as far as Medicaid is concerned.
Okay, so it's the marital unit, whatever anybody owns.
Whatever the asset is exactly. It doesn't matter how it's titled or whose name it's in.
Okay.
So a married couple, we can, generally speaking, we can protect 120,000 or so. For, let's say the husband's going in, we can protect that for the wife, plus the home, typically plus the home.
No matter how much equity's in the home, it doesn't matter.
There are equity limits, 500,000 or so. If there's more equity than that, then we need to take a look at the house also.
Okay. So we've got over $500,000 of equity in a home and $120,000 of cash or cash equivalents. If you've got above that, then you need to look at a Medicaid asset protection trust.
Correct.
Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, and that, now bear in mind that, Marshall, that's for a married couple. Now, if you're a single person, the situation is a lot worse because a single person can only keep $2,000. That's it. Period.
There is that big a difference, 2,000 to 120,000 if you're single.
Because what Medicaid is trying to do is not completely impoverish the other spouse. But if you're single, you're in trouble. If you own a home and you're single, you're in trouble. Because let's say you have to move out of that home and go into a nursing home. The home is an asset because there's no spouse living in the home. So that means the house is fair game for Medicaid as well.
Got it. So it's better to be married. But the problem that I see is, say you have a husband that goes in, right? And then the husband passes away, then the wife is considered single at that point. And then everything is fair game after 2,000.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what you just hit on right there is why it's a good idea to go ahead and set that trust up ahead of time. Because I have seen situations where the husband goes in, the couple just about somehow survives that, but then what do you do if, God forbid, then the wife gets sick?
Right. And the husband passes away and the wife is there left alone, and the kids are going, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with mom?
And I can't believe this is happening again. I mean, I've had cases where both spouses have had dementia, and it's awful.
Yeah. So in that situation, you got these people coming to you. What's the process? How does it work? Like, how do you go about setting up an asset protection trust, and what are the documents involved and all that other stuff that you need to make this work for people? Right.
So it's similar. It's a little more complicated, but it's really very similar to setting up a will.
Okay.
So, I have a basic questionnaire that I ask folks to fill out, family information, asset information, do you own a home, all that good stuff.
Right.
And then once we have that information, we can start the planning. Now, I mentioned earlier 120,000. The spouse can only keep half of that. So what the rule actually says is the community spouse, so the one not in the nursing home, can keep half the assets up to a maximum of 120,000. So if they have 120, she's only going to be able to keep 60.
What happens to the other 60?
They have to spend it, or we're going to put it in the trust. Now, we can set up a trust for them, but as a lot of people know, Medicaid has a look-back period, right? So you can't just set up a trust today and say tomorrow we're good.
Right.
You have to set up that trust, wait 5 years, and hope that everyone's able to stay healthy during that 5-year period. And if if we can do that, because the look back is also a look forward. So if we set up a trust in September of 21, we look forward to September of 26 and hope husband and wife can both stay healthy till then. If they can, then those assets that we've moved on over into the trust, they're protected. But again,
And somebody else is basically the head of that trust, right? They manage that trust, either a child or something like that. Now, there are other types of trusts that exist. You hear about, trusts that people set up to avoid probate tax and stuff like that. Right. Those are different, right? And what's the difference between one of those sort of avoid probate trusts and an asset Medicaid trust?
Right. Great question, because there's a lot of confusion around this.
Right.
A lot of people have a revocable living trust, which is fine, as you say, if you want to avoid probate, if you want to make sure money goes correctly to the kids, maybe delay distributions to a child who might be struggling financially, etc. All those things, the revocable trust is great for that, but it does not provide asset protection. And the reason for that is because the people have direct access to the trust. The grantor, the person who sets it up, can take the money out whenever they want to. So right. Medicaid says, okay, then as far as we're concerned, that's your money, no protection.
Right. So that special trust, which helps them avoid probate, does nothing to protect them from Medicaid saying, hey, you got to spend down that money or give it over to or use it to buy services from this healthcare provider until it's gone. And then at that point, we'll step in and we'll start.
Right. Exactly. Now, the Asset Protection Trust, the one that we set up hopefully 5 years ahead of time, that's an irrevocable trust. Now, people freak out, why do I want an irrevocable trust? Well, we can build it so that there is still access to the money, as you mentioned, perhaps through a trusted child or another family member, so they can still get access to the money. But it's an asset protection trust. What they cannot do is directly themselves take money out of the trust. Because
There has to be somebody else that does it. And I assume that there are protections that keep that somebody else from dipping their hand in the trust and spending it on themselves, right? It has to be spent on the people who set it up. The
parents, if you will, mom and dad. That's right. Of course, we want to pick a child or somewhat adult child or someone we trust in the first place in that role. But yes, you're correct. There are protections in there if that goes south.
You can also pick anybody. I mean, you don't have to pick a child. Right. You can pick a lawyer, right? Or there are some banks that do that.
There are banks that do it. They charge, of course. But yeah, a lot of people pick lawyers, CPAs. They might have a brother, a business friend, and anybody like that. It doesn't have to be a child. Yeah.
So if somebody wants to set up an asset protection trust for Medicaid, does it protect those assets from anybody else, from any other creditors?
It does.
Are there any other benefits besides just setting it up for Medicaid?
So it does. It protects from all creditors, not just Medicaid. In fact, as long as it's not an existing creditor and you're not trying to, defraud or get out of paying that creditor, it protects you from all creditors. And that's immediate. The 5-year wait, the look back period, is only for Medicaid. So let's say I set up that trust and I have a car accident or I'm sued. The money in that trust is protected immediately after it's set up. It's only Medicaid that we have to wait the 5 years for.
So I'm a bankruptcy lawyer. I've had lots of clients come into me. The number one reason why people file bankruptcy is getting sick or having an accident or some sort of heart attack or something with bad insurance or no insurance. And I've had clients who basically come to me who basically own their home free and clear, right? Yeah. Don't have insurance, are not 65 yet, so they're not eligible for Medicare yet, and then have a massive heart attack and run up $200,000 in medical bills.
Yeah.
And basically, their choice is that they basically have to give the hospital a lien on their house, and so when that house is ultimately sold or refinanced, the hospital's going to get paid.
Right.
So it sounds to me like if if you are out there and you don't have health insurance and you can't afford health insurance because it's $2,000 a month because you're the age of 60 and you're not working and you own your house, an asset protection trust may be a great way of ensuring that that hospital can't go after your home. So it may help for Medicaid, but it might help with other things too.
Yeah.
Is that right?
That's absolutely right. Yeah, it may well help in that situation with big hospital bills, all the things that you mentioned. There are many people out there in that situation, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, until there's a change in the healthcare laws where it provides, reasonably priced or free healthcare to everybody, we're going to have this gap. And there's so many people nowadays that this economy who are losing their jobs in their mid-50s and are finding it so difficult to find work because they're overqualified for the jobs that they apply for, but there are no jobs that they're qualified for that want to hire them because of their age. I mean, let's just say that it's hard in your 50s and early 60s to go find a job if you're laid off from, where you're middle management. It's very, very difficult.
It is.
And so this is a way of sort of protecting that nest egg to make sure that it isn't exposed if something bad happens, like an illness, or if you or your spouse get Alzheimer's or some other, terrible disease that requires you to go into a nursing home. So let's talk about the nursing home. Is there, for Medicaid nursing homes, I know that there are lots of different options out there. Are all of those options available to people who basically have nursing homes provided on Medicare, or is there a limited amount of limited number?
Those options are available, and a lot of people say, I don't want to be in a nursing home on Medicaid, and of course I understand that. But what I let folks know is the caregiver, so the nurse or the CNA that's in there in the nursing home looking after you, he or she doesn't know how your bill is paid. So you're going to get the same care as someone in that nursing home on private pay. And so that, that's number one. And number two, I would say that my experience has been, and a lot of clients over the years, their experience, where you really get the best care in a nursing home or anywhere for that matter, any kind of facility outside the home, you get the best care where the family is on top of it. Where the family's visiting every day or every few days, and the staff know that the family's going to be coming in.
Right. Yeah, that's great advice. So if you're going to do this, right, yes, the facility is important, but what's most important is you being there, you as the child being there for your parent or your spouse, so that they know that you're basically hawking it and that you're going to make sure that they provide the best care possible to your loved ones, so that nothing bad happens.
Exactly. Yeah. The family has to be on top of that, just like in any other situation, just like in the hospital, you would want to be there for mom or dad as the health advocate for them.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right about that. And just went through that with my mother-in-law. So, I know exactly what you're talking about. No matter how good the hospital is, you got to stay on top of it to make sure that everybody's doing all that they can to help your family member.
Yeah.
So summing this up, it sounds to me like asset protection trusts are a really good idea. And it sounds to me, correct me if I'm wrong, is that if it gets to the point where the person has to go in to get those services, it's probably too late. So you need to start thinking about that in your 50s or early 60s to set that up so that when you get to your 70s or 80s, you're not left and saying, gosh, I wish I had done that in the past.
Right.
Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, that is a fair statement, except one thing I would say, Marshall, is we do crisis planning as well. So it's never too late. Okay. Even, especially if it's a married couple, there are certain special types of annuities that, it's complicated to go into all the details, but there are other strategies, as I say, especially for a married couple. Even if one of the couple is already in a nursing home, typically we can protect all the assets for another spouse. We don't do it with a trust. We do it with special types of annuities, and there are other strategies that we use. So it's never too late to, to save some of the money, but
Right.
You're absolutely right. Of course, the best way to do it is to plan ahead.
Right. And that's what I was trying to say. Plan ahead, not something nobody wants to think about this. It's like nobody wants to go see a bankruptcy lawyer. My joke used to be, I'm like going to the dentist. Till one of my clients said, Marshall, I would rather go to the dentist than go see you.
Right.
Nobody wants to go talk about end of life decisions or trust or getting Alzheimer's, but it's important, especially as we all start living longer. It's an important discussion.
Exactly.
So, what are the big mistakes that people need to avoid? If you were to list off a couple big mistakes that you've seen people do, what are the biggies to avoid so that you don't have this problem?
I would say by far and away, honestly, the biggest mistake is not seeking advice, not seeking professional help. I see people sometimes when they've already submitted a Medicaid application themselves and made a mess of it, and they've been denied. And then, the person in the Medicaid agency in social services, I mean, they're human, just like anybody else. And then once that application has been denied, it's really an uphill battle to try and get that approved afterwards. So seek advice first before you do anything. Like you said, with lawyers, somebody never wants to pay a lawyer. But, that hour of advice for a consult can save you thousands, tens of thousands later on in this field.
Right.
So get advice. The other big mistake that I see people make is they transfer assets, they give money away to their kids, and they think it's not in my name anymore, so I'll be okay. That doesn't work.
Right. Same thing in bankruptcy is that don't touch anything, don't move anything, talk to a lawyer, get their advice and get their help to help you set things up.
Right. And just like you specializing in bankruptcy, it's really important that they see someone like myself specializing in elder law. I mean, honestly, I've even had people come to me who said other lawyers have told them just transfer, if it's the husband with the dementia, transfer everything to the wife. So that doesn't work. So you really need to talk to someone that specializes in this area.
Yeah, it's complicated. And there's a lot of traps for the unwary for somebody to fall into, and then you can't back out. It's not like you can say, whoops, I'm going to withdraw my application and I'll submit it, because they've already got all that information.
Yeah, and they've already got all the information. Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, well, Simon, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your busy day to talk to me and my listeners about, Medicaid Asset Protection Trust and the other things. And for you listening, thank you so much. If you enjoyed the show, consider subscribing on Spotify or liking us on Facebook or following us on Twitter. If you have questions or want to make a comment or have an idea for a show, visit our website at www.marshallslayton.com. Thanks again, and see you next time.
Thanks, Marshall. Appreciate you having me on.